Along the way, I had an incredible journey on understanding what music does to the human and what does to the soul. And I thought, wow, what a thing to combine. And surely I'm not the first person to do this. There must be multitudes of people who have done this. But what I've done, Mark, is very unique in the fact that, I created a story, and in the background, I would think about the textures and the sounds and what those epic scenes would be like if I was to compose and orchestrate for them. And it helped me write the books as well as write the music for the books and the stories. So to me, it was almost inseparable.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 378 of the Stark Reflections podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In today's episode, I have an interview with Dominician Gennari. Dominician is a writer, a storyteller, a composer, a musician, among other things, who has expanded his grand mythology, The War for Ascension, into a multimedia book and novella opus, along with accompanying soundtracks of epic music. We talk about that and so much more in the forthcoming episode where, yes, you will get to hear a sample of his magnificent and moving compositions. But that's coming up later in this episode. First, let's hear a word from this episode's sponsor. And we have a new sponsor and also a word about a previous sponsor.
Silent screams bounce around my head like an impending storm, brewing into a force that will escape in a wild dance of chaos and be lost forever if I don't stop to write them down.
That's right. This episode is sponsored by my forthcoming book, One Hand Screaming, 20 Haunting Years. That's sort of the teaser or the logline for One Hand Screaming, 20 Haunting Years. It's in the introduction. It's lifted from the introduction of the original book, actually, from 20 years ago. But I wanted to use this spot to remind folks that the Kickstarter for One Hand Screaming actually ends on Tuesday, September 10th. And that removes your possibility of getting access to the deluxe faux leather bound edition, all kinds of other goodies that are related to it, including several goodies specifically for writers. And you can bypass the horror stuff if you're not a horror fan and get right into those goodies for writers. There's sort of a $1 skip to the add-ons. And within the add-ons, you get access to, it's basically less than half of the cost of a regular. It's 2 hours of one-on-one consultation with me. Regularly costs $149 US, but you get 2 full hours of consultation for $199 Canadian. And that's because Kickstarter forces me to price everything in Canadian dollars, which means I kind of have to guesstimate what it's going to be in American dollars based on the exchange rate. But in any case, you have access to that as well as a package of several of my books for writers, including an author's guide to working with libraries and bookstores. So if you want to take advantage of some of those discounts, etc., you've only got a few days from the posting of this podcast, which is being posted on Friday, September 6th. And so you only have a few days. But the ad is for One Hand Screaming in general. Sure, right now it's the Kickstarter, but afterwards it is the book, which is launching in October, and again, because it's the 20th anniversary edition of the very first book I ever published, I'm pretty thrilled and excited about it. One Hand Screaming was the very first book that I published in 2004, And it was a collection of mostly previously published horror stories that I had only ever had in small press magazines, etc. And I was frustrated that I didn't actually have a book out there. So 10 years before all the cool kids started self-publishing, I self-published it. And the only option there was no Kindle back then. There were no ebooks that were really readily available in any format. It was in print. I used Ingram Lightning Source, which was sort of it's the back end to the more, I guess, user-friendly Ingram Spark, which exists now, but didn't exist until maybe, 6 years ago or something like that. But yeah, that's what I did. I made the print book available. And then when the Kindle came out, when Kindle Direct Publishing came out, and when Smashwords came out, I used both Smashwords and Kindle Direct Publishing to make the ebook available of One Hand Screaming. So it's kind of a really important book for me because it was the first book that I put out there, and it kind of helped me get involved in doing stuff with bookstores, etc. So again, real big passion project for me, and it's fun to get to return to my horror roots because that is what I started writing all those years ago, and I've been playing with it a lot more lately. So that's it for that part of this ad read. One Hand Screaming. You go to onehandscreaming.com and you'll find links to everything for that. Now, I wanted to talk about a sponsor that I've had for the past month and a half or so on the podcast, and it is Cruising Writers. I've been playing a clip from Cruising Writers, particularly because I was going to be a guest. Maybe you're getting ahead of me here, or I'm getting ahead of myself. But I was supposed to be a guest on a Cruising Writers cruise for writers in February, March of 2025. Along with Aaron Wright from Wide for the Win. But unfortunately, I heard from Julie, who's one of the organizers of the Cruising Writers Retreat, that even though they have sold tickets, they haven't sold enough tickets to make it worth their while. So they've unfortunately had to cancel Cruising Writers. And I feel terrible about that. I was really looking forward to it. I'd heard from some people who had booked and were planning on going, and I was so looking forward to spending time with the writers. But I understand they're running a business, and, not as many people were willing to put that investment in at this particular time. So they have canceled the 2025 cruise. And I just wanted to let you know because for 8, 9, 10 episodes, I have played the ad from Cruising Writers. So I just want folks to know that the Cruising Writers cruise with Mark Leslie Lefebvre and Aaron Wright is not happening in the winter of 2025. And I feel terrible because it is difficult for any business, author business, any other sort of business that you run, because you need to sell tickets in order to pay for the huge investment. And I guess they reached the cutoff point, the point of no return, where there was no refund on the cruise. So they had to make that really hard decision, and I feel terrible for them. I thought they were amazing. Want to continue to support Cruising Writers. Really love what they do. I think going on writing retreats is really fun. I mean, I love spending time hanging out with writers. So in any case, just wanted to share that update with you guys. Now we're going to play the bumper and get into some comments. Okay, for comments over on the Twitter sphere, Edwin Downward said on Twitter/X, in relation to episode 377, Pivoting Your Publishing Dreams with Denise Masser, Stark Reflections now has me thinking about the pivots I've made in my writing life. From wanting to write, to writing a novel, to setting my sights on writing for publication, to discovering the industry had changed so much, I was self-publishing. Thank you, Edwin, for that comment. I'm wondering how many other writers have pivoted. Now, I talked about in the ad read section of this episode that I haven't given up on traditional publishing. I still do work with traditional publishers when the time and feeling and essence and when the stars align properly. I'm willing to do that. But it was 20 years ago that I had made that pivot and wanted to have a book of mine out, and so I released it myself and learned a lot of stuff. And it was so many manual things having to figure that out. It's so funny as I'm working on the new version of the book and how much more I have learned over the years about formatting and all the things, all the tricks that I've picked up, both the tricks I've picked up doing it myself, but also the things I've learned when I was in the master's program for Western Colorado University, which I just graduated from. So anyways, I want to thank you for that, Edwin. I'm sure that there are other listeners of the podcast who've had to pivot their writing career or different things that approaches they've taken. For example, one of the pivots I know that's common is people believing that they want to write full time, but some folks who get to a point where they can do that realize they don't necessarily want to. I mean, for myself, that was another pivot for me. I was starting to earn enough money from my writing that I didn't need to work, but working part-time actually helped me in a dramatic way. You know, taking on that consulting role with Draft to Digital for 20 hours a week made the world of difference to me because too much free time was not good for me. I got less done because I thought I had all the time in the world. You've heard the tortoise and the hare. It was that with me. I was just being the hare thinking, I got all the time in the world, I get stuff done. But actually limiting my time by having this part-time responsibility that, I mean, and it comes and goes in waves in terms of it's more than 20 hours some weeks and it's less than 20 hours other weeks, but it all balances out. But having that pressure was so important for me. So anyways, the pivots that we make in writing and publishing in our businesses and the way we approach things are really important. I'd love to hear what your pivots are, and I'd love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you're reflecting on as you're listening to the podcast, because it reminds me that we're all learning and we're all growing as we reflect on the things, all the things. In any case, let's play a bumper and I'll do a short, relatively personal update. Okay, so how many of you are tired of me talking about my Kickstarter in One Hand Screaming? But here's one of the things I've learned about the Kickstarter so far is I haven't pushed it enough. And from all of the people that I've seen being very, very successful, they push it really, really hard. And even now, as I'm talking about it, I feel like, oh my God, Mark, shut up. Nobody wants to hear about it. But, sharing repeated things on Facebook and social media and the various email blasts that I'm sending out and all of the things that I'm doing, and even the paid sponsorship that I've done for this, it's kind of like this 100% effort for 1% return. But you have to continue to throw that effort in. And that's one of the things I'm learning. So if you've never done a Kickstarter and you're thinking about doing the Kickstarter, just know a few things. Know that it is a lot more work than you imagine. And if you're uncomfortable with pushing and selling, you're going to be really, really, really dramatically uncomfortable because you're going to feel like you're going on and on about something over and over. But that's one of the elements for success. And as I get down to the crunch in the last few days of this Kickstarter, and it started off dramatically well, and appreciate and love just the amazing support that I got there. I did set my goal relatively low in order to achieve it quickly, because I wanted to achieve it quickly in the hopes that it would be a project Kickstarter loves. But no, it's a project Kickstarter ignores. So, I mean, again, that's, with all of the, whatever thousands and thousands of projects that are running, they obviously can't pay attention to mine. But that being said, I am learning some things, and I will do a bit of a wrap up, probably a special episode where I share more of those Kickstarter learnings with you guys, just so you can understand and learn some of the things from what I did right, and many things from many of the things that I have done wrong. And one of the things I've done wrong, and Joanna Penn was talking about this in a recent episode of her podcast, was I didn't give myself enough time. I didn't give myself enough time to get a proof copy of the special deluxe edition that I could hold up and show people. So that requires months and months of pre-planning to do it properly. In the indie author realm, that's not a thing. And so There are some other things that I'm learning about in terms even of working on the release in October, with getting in contact with bookstores, because some of the locations that I've talked to, even though I'm doing it, well, about a month and a bit in advance, is they're already booked up for the whole year. So that's another thing. And I know this. I know this. I should have been contacting them in the early summer, but I wanted to have more things in place. And of course, I had a lot on my plate. So that's, again, some of the other learnings. But as I've recognized that I am rambling about all the mistakes I've made, let's look at a different author who's done some really incredibly powerful things. Multimedia storytelling with music and words, and I've got a copy of his first book in the War for Ascension series, and it's absolutely gorgeous, and his music is gorgeous too. And so without further rambling, I'm going to roll the bumper, and we're going to hear my interview with Dominician Gennari. Hey, Dominician, welcome to the Stark Reflections podcast.
Thank you for having me, Mark. It's a pleasure.
It's great to chat with you again. So you have not yet been on the podcast, but we have spoken before. And when I found out what you were doing, I definitely wanted to interview you for the benefit of my listeners, so they could also benefit. But let's start off with young Dominician in terms of the creative person. When did writing and all the creativity stuff start for you?
Sure. So I guess the creativity started with music, actually, Mark.
Yeah.
So yeah, music was something that deeply touched me and deeply moved me, as far as an artistic form is concerned. And at the ripe age of, I believe, 13 or 14, I was in my first concert band at school, and I discovered heavy metal music, believe it or not. And
Because
you
the
know,
band played it, right? The school band played heavy metal, right? No?
one parts of it, yeah, yeah. So we
Really?
had some heavy rock songs in the concert band, absolutely.
Oh, good
Uh,
stuff.
he was a fantastic band leader, and he let me have my solo and to express myself, and it was a wonderful experience. And one thing led to the next, and about probably 6 or 7 years after that, I discovered Tolkien.
Okay.
And yeah, that was profound. I mean, I would take time off work during lunch breaks to walk down to the local central business district in Melbourne City and engage in reading books, and it was a really enlightened moment for me in that day and in that era. So from there, the idea to write pretty much presented itself through Tolkien, I guess, and his
Really?
works.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
And not to jump the gun, but the writing, the epic fantasy, the Tolkien-esque writing, and the previous creativity is something that you ended up combining.
that's right. So along the way, I had an incredible journey on understanding what music does to the human and what does to the soul. And I thought, wow, what a thing to combine. And surely I'm not the first person to do this. There must be multitudes of people who have done this. But what I've done, Mark, is very unique in the fact that, I created a story, and in the background, I would think about the textures and the sounds and what those epic scenes would be like if I was to compose and orchestrate for them. And it helped me write the books as well as write the music for the books and the stories. So to me, it was almost inseparable. Uh,
Right,
uh,
right.
yeah.
So it's almost in the same way that when you see a movie clip, and they sometimes do this during awards ceremonies when they go to introduce sound direction and stuff like that. They play the clip without the music, without the sound,
Mhm.
and then they play it with the sound, and you realize just how much it enhances that experience, and you don't even realize it. It gets into you, and it's subtle, right? I mean, it's powerful, but it gets in a subtle way. You don't realize it's there until it's missing.
Absolutely. That's very well said. And it's well noted, Mark, because understanding, and I guess you could say I'm classically trained to the degree in which I've been educated. I had the honor of learning off one of the most incredible music teachers, Duncan Roy Lorien, and he explained why a church cadence, so that's for the non-musicians, it's simply a piece of a chord change that happens at the end of a section of music.
Okay.
That is this triumphant dominant seventh chord into the major chord, and that really big uplifting moment it touches you on a level where it goes back many years from when pianos were first made. Equal temperament was first put together, and we have this huge history of these chords being played in a certain way, arranged in a certain way. So yeah, when you listen to that or watch that film clip for the latest video game or blockbuster movie, you turn the sound off and you lose so much of that, lure. So yeah, big connection with writing and music.
So you played music in the band, and then you became a composer. I'm curious about that transition on how, because then you also became a composer of words. So I'm curious about, so Tolkien inspired the composition of words.
Mhm.
But in terms of loving music and learning under some great mentors, how did you become a composer then?
Very well. So I come from Italian heritage. So my ancestors are Italian. As you can tell, I'm not a typical Aussie. I have dark features and dark hair.
Yeah.
So effectively, my father's family, they would gather in the kitchen, and they were incredible cooks, and they would sing. They would sing works from Madame Butterfly, Giuseppe Verdi's orchestrations, and a lot of his compositions, and they would sing just a cappella with their voices. And this deeply moved me as a young person. So, how I was able to move into that classical background and understanding the fundamental drive as to why we listen to a Taylor Swift song today or a Nine Inch Nails song, and the reason why we just love when that chorus comes in or love the bridge section. And so that developed over time, and getting the skills and understanding how all these notes worked was a path I took that wasn't an easy path, Mark. It was difficult. It was a lot of hours, and but it was so worthwhile. So that's the composition aspect as to how I came to writing that kind of thing. But I will remind you that I've performed in industrial metal bands, and even today I write in a heavy genre, electro metal genre. But I add in the compositional aspects, those triumphant chords, the choirs, the orchestra, to that heavy rock slash metal scene. So to create something that's a variation of the great music that came before us, just
Yeah.
changing it up. Yeah.
It's like a fusion of different styles, right? When you're like with cooking, you can do that. You can do that with the music as well. So, so I
Yeah.
have to ask you, did you also gain an affinity for working in the kitchen and creating food, different recipes and things like that?
Oh yeah. Well, my grandparents on my father's side were both chefs from Villa di Capri in Italy. So the Amalfi Coast, the island of Sorrento. Yeah, off that archipelago area there. So I've been taught and watched them cook, and yeah, I have some signature dishes I'm rather proud of, I might add. So I fancy myself a little bit of a chef.
I have to wonder if when you're doing something in the kitchen, if you're also composing the soundtrack to the creation of this of this edible feast.
Oh yeah, I heard so many things in the kitchen. So it's such a wonderful way to grow up, Mark. It was just
Yeah.
amazing. Sunday
Awesome.
morning. Yeah,
So
awesome.
let's get to your latest dish then. Latest dish, we have the War of Ascension, A Crisis Reborn. Got this
Yes.
gorgeous hardcover here that I'm holding, beautiful art, etc. But it also comes with a soundtrack, right? It also comes with something that for every movement, for every scene, for every chapter, you've got accompanying music. So how does that work? Because I mean, this would be, I'm guessing this is probably going to be what, 120,000 words, something like that.
169,000 to be exact.
Whoa. Okay, maybe
Yeah.
the font is
Big.
smaller than I thought. 169,000 words. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's going to be, I'm not good at it. That's going to be like a 12 to 14 hour reading experience, maybe 16, 18, depending on the speed of the reader.
Yeah.
How does that work with the soundtrack then?
Yeah. So what I did is, of course, I don't know if many of your readers would know, but Richard Wagner, who was a classical composer, German composer, he recorded the ring cycle, not recorded because back then they didn't have recording devices. He composed.
Yes. Other people later on recorded it. Okay.
That's many iterations. He created the ring cycle based on the Norse myth, based on the ancient stories, and effectively what he did was every single part of that story was a what he called a leitmotif. So he would have like a riff that would represent the person, clasping the ring and walking up the mountain, and then the nymphs in the sea, gathering and talking. So I didn't do that. What I did was I understand that people's attention, it's not on a 14-hour procession of music.
Right.
So I picked 10 key moments based on the chapters, and I hit it really hard. So I said, okay, these are not going to be, soundscape compositions. No, I want a 100 voice choir singing in the language that I created. I want to have the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, key members of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. I'm going to gather them together. I'm going to conduct them, in which I have on video, by the way. And
oh my God, you're gonna have to send me a link to that so I can share it.
Very cool stuff. So yeah, I'll have to dig it out in the mess of videos I have here, but I can definitely find that for you. And the Royal Melbourne Philharmonic Choir. So
whoa,
and yeah, very cool stuff. So
how did you get all these people to do this?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm blessed to grow up in Melbourne is like a big country town. So you have access to friends who played. I knew the first tuba player in the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, the first and second violinists. So you start networking and gathering the respect and the rapport. And, it's just a matter of showing the love to the community and say, look, I'm doing this wonderful project. I'd love to have you sing on it. What's it going to take? Is it a matter of money? Is it a matter of what can I do for you? So I just put my neck on the line for all of this stuff, Mark, and it just happened.
Wow, that's amazing. So I'm almost tempted, since this is a podcast and it's audio, I'm almost tempted to say, okay, we're now going to listen to this particular piece, a brief segment from this piece, which I can always edit in later because I didn't warn you about this. It was inspired as we're talking. Yeah. And then maybe you can talk a little bit about maybe the scene it's from or what's so powerful. Is there a particular one that you would want me to be able to share in the podcast? And then as a little teaser, and then talk about what that scene is.
Absolutely. So the second track on the soundtrack is called The Light of the Hydroverse. In my story, the Hydroverse is kind of like, if we look at established stories that we understand and know, you have the Force, which is in Star Wars. That's that intangible power and energy you tap into. Neo taps into the Matrix. Mine is the Hydroverse, and it's a part of the physical universe that mixes with that magical essence. And that second track is basically a solo. It comes in with a solo voice, which is me singing in the language I created, and just basically saying that we are one with this energy, with this all-loving, encompassing energy that we are far closer to than what we'd like to believe. And it leads into that, and it speaks to that, and then the 100 voice choir just blasts in and takes your face off. and screamed the fact that we are one with this beautiful, loving presence. So, and it's very powerful. And yeah, so I'd love you to share that one. That'd be wonderful.
Powerful indeed. Wow, amazing. So thanks for allowing me to share a clip of that. So I want to go back to something now. So I'm still blown away the composition of words, the composition of powerful music, but then
Mhm.
also the composition of a language. And that, I mean, we know Tolkien did that, right?
Yeah,
When he was a teenager, when he was in college, he
yeah.
was or uni. I should say it properly for who I'm speaking with.
Albanians. Yes.
He composed his own language. So when did you start composing? When did you start composing the language in this series? I guess it's the beginning of a series, right?
That's right. Yes, book two will be out next year, and
Yeah.
book three follows. So I wanted to give my story, and this was one of the things David Farland, for those who don't know, he was my mentor for many years before his passing, and he loved the idea that I was able to apply that the Greco-Roman Latinate textures and sounds to my names, to the names on my map. He was really happy with that and loved that, and said,
Yeah.
"You remind me, kid, of Gene Wolfe." And I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
"Oh wow, I don't even know what to say to that. Thank you, sir." So effectively, I had from the beginning, I had this affinity to want to create a language, not to compete with a master Professor Tolkien. No one can. The guy was a linguist. He was a specialist at Oxford University. So I would never hold a candle to the man. However, I did feel compelled to create and give this sense of weight to my mythology. So I went back to the languages, Romanian, Latin, ancient Greek, Katharevosa, and I started unpacking and piecing apart, pulling apart, repacking the what I believed were neologies, they're new creations of words, and applied them to my text.
Wow. So could you treat us since come on again, this is an audioscape we're in. Could you
So
potentially treat us with a statement or a line or something someone says in the War of for Ascension, and then the English so we understand what it is.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, a greeting that the Kenorian race of my books, they greet each other, and it's a rather beautiful way to greet someone. And it is Marcianin Erano, which means may the serenity be, may serenity follow you or be or surround you. And Eranoi Tasienin, which means and also with you. It's just such a graceful way of
Oh
it's
wow.
lovely.
And it's universal in many ways. I go back to my Catholic roots, and uh,
Yes,
peace be with you, or may the force be with you, or may
yes,
the odds be ever in your favor. Right? So you have, but again, it's such a, I mean, and then there's even there's old Italian phrases and Irish phrases about may the wind be ever at your back and stuff like that. All of
yeah,
these things that are just beautiful. So it has that natural generosity or compassion for another
yes.
person. Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So let's go. So David Farland, and there's a quote. There's a quote from David Farland. I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read this. I'll put the little light down so I can actually read this on the back
Yeah.
of the book. Dominician's prose is very polished and enjoyable. I like the use of Latinate words. It reminds me of Gene Wolfe's use of them to add science fiction flavor to his far future worlds. David Farland, New York Times bestselling author of the Rune Lords series. So how did you? I mean, Dave was in the U.S. You're in Australia. How did you end up connecting with him?
Yes, so I had a little stint, 3-year stint, not very little, but a stint working for a book to script in Hollywood for a book to script a project in which I was working alongside some
Right.
incredible, incredible talents there. However, due to irreconcilable differences,
Hmm.
the project was not able to move forward, and I introverted. I sort of went in on myself and thought I failed. I'm no good. All the things that we do as
Yeah.
humans, Mark.
Yeah.
It's just that, the mind is a crazy, crazy thing. It's a mess. But I ended up through Joni Labaki of Writers of the Future. She said, "Why don't you, yeah, contact David, see what happened, what's happening over there in that space." So yeah, I
Awesome.
met David,
Yeah,
and
as Dave was the head judge for the longest time of Writers of the Future until his passing
yeah.
recently, of course. So in Writers of the Future, had you submitted to Writers of the Future? Were you a past winner? How did you get to know Joni and those folks?
Yes, I submitted once. So I submitted once, and I there was a wonderful course that they have for writers at the time.
Yeah.
I did the course, and you had please forgive me, I might not be able to remember their names, but David Farland, Orson Scott Card, and there was another fellow.
Tim Powers?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
Powers. Yes,
Okay.
yes. And they curated a course and made sure that they touch base on all the aspects as to how to improve your fiction writing and make it more profound. And I completed that certificate, and I just reached out to Joni, and she's such a lovely human, such a lovely woman, and she said, "Look, reach out to David, see what can happen there." And he understood what I went through, Mark. He said, "You know what, Dominician, you're not a failure. Far from it. This is commonplace in Hollywood. And
Yeah.
from Australia, we don't get that. We don't have that. We just
Right.
don't have it here. So we're not used to the fail cycle, the try-fail cycle." So yeah, he was beautiful to take me under his wing and treat me like almost like a father figure, treat me like a son, really get me on
Okay.
the right. Beloved
Dave,
David.
yeah, yeah. Dave was such a sweetheart of a guy, so compassionate, so caring, so wanting to lift up other writers. And he
Yeah.
spent so much of his time doing that. So I'm glad you had a opportunity to work with him. So I want to go back to this. So you had Hollywood knocking
Mhm.
at the door, not only knocking at the door, basically coming in,
Yeah.
and for most writers, that is the dream. And yet you chose, after some experiences there, you chose to not go with that path, which, I mean, I'm sure a lot of writers listening to this say, like, I don't care if they screw it up. I just want it on the big screen, or I just want to be able to. So, I mean, you don't have to get into the details, but the choice
Yeah.
to take that project and say, not with my baby, that must have been difficult. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can speak to that. So, as I mentioned before, being irreconcilable differences. So, something had happened during the midway of the production, moving towards the pilot. Because when you do a series, or you're looking to do a series, you do a big treatment, which is a long
Right.
form synopsis, and it becomes a pilot, and then something was not able to be resolved, and it was it wasn't the right thing for me to do. I couldn't with any conscience go ahead with that because I didn't
Right.
agree with the parameters of that. So we can leave that at there. So
Yeah.
however I missed, I turned down possibly millions of dollars, tens of millions probably, in the process, because it was lined up to be the next thing that competed with the Rings of Power, because at that point they were,
Yeah.
2016, 2017, they were looking to do, the studios were looking for a, a counterpart to that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and my story having the big thing that they really, really resonated with was the whole basis of the reincarnation cycle. So the protagonist, without spoiling my story, that reincarnation, past life transgression, You get to come back in the new life and fix it, the past life bad decisions that destroyed the world. So that was the big thing for them. They were super interested in
Wow.
my understanding of reincarnation and the whole process. Yeah.
Wow. So at what point did your work with Dave, did he help you with, okay, I'm gonna take the reins and DIY this project?
So David was remarkable. He straight off the bat, he corrected some very trivial errors that most of us authors do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just trivial stuff that just don't do that. Slap across the head. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And you can see in his comments, this the 5,000th time he's told someone. Um, but the general idea and how I understood the story arc and the try-fail cycles and how that was just natively, I guess I was lucky. I had an understanding of that, and it was a good process that I had down. He corrected a lot of things, and he was blown away with the idea of putting music to these stories. And he was in the process of commissioning me to write music for one of his upcoming books. And
Right.
we were working on that, but it never happened, as you know. Dave
Yeah.
passed.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow. Yeah, and that I can imagine that. Particularly given Dave's clout and visibility in terms of a project like that. So, okay, so purchasing the book, and then how does one access the music? How does that work? All right. So if somebody wants to, they hear it and they go, "Well, it sounds amazing. I wanna read the book. I wanna listen to the music." What's sort of right now, what's the optimum way that people can do that?
absolutely. So the best I've got right now, Mark, is one of two options. So if you do purchase a book internationally, if you reach out to me on my website, reach out to me, through social media, any way you can grab me, I will respond to you. Something as simple as a screenshot of a receipt, and I will send you the complimentary album. And I will do that with all of my books because the
Yeah.
album really, or the soundtrack really does immerse you into my world. It really does. So draft to digital, of course. You can go through draft to digital. You can go to Amazon. You can come to my website and purchase wonderfully sprayed edged books and
Ooh.
signature books. And yeah,
So even
so
nicer than the one I ordered online here.
oh,
So
yours is pretty nice. Yours is pretty nice.
it's
But you know
gorgeous
what,
because it's
Mark?
got a beautiful matte finish too, and it's just
Yeah,
lovely. I mean, I mean the care and attention. So not only you have the nice matte dust jacket, but then you've got this gorgeous art on the inside. So just really beautifully done. So obviously, kudos to
thank you.
whoever you worked with for designing that, or are you also an artist?
I put it all together
Oh
myself.
my
So
God. Okay, wow.
yeah, yeah. So
Trying to find
friends,
something
Mark.
you don't do.
You got to do everything these days, Mark. You have to
Don't
be.
sit still. That's what you don't do. You don't sit still. So so book one is out. A Crisis Reborn is book one in the series. When did that come out?
Yes, so that came out in 2022 in August.
Okay.
And I have a novella series that is a tie-in series to the War for Ascension and that series. And it's basically all the side quest stories that happen
Right.
that are all going to form this beautiful web and framework for the
Right.
entire story. Because I wanted this with so many of the authors I've read, and not many of them did it. And I
Right.
felt, or they may have done it a little bit of it here and there, maybe a novella here. And no, I wanted to have two series running in parallel, and I released them opposite times. So you'll get one book of the War for Ascension, you'll get one book for the novella series, but the novella series is turning out to get a little fat.
As happens.
Yes, the stories are getting thicker and more juicy.
Of
So
course.
yeah, yeah.
Awesome. And so when's what's next then?
Yes. So the next book, which you should see very, very soon, I'm still working with Dave Farland's editors, which I'm absolutely blessed. So I'm just about to send the final manuscript for book two in the Ascension Archive series, which is the novella series.
Yeah.
Will be out very, very soon. And the War for Ascension, I've book two. I'm I'm creating that as we speak. I do full length treatments, 10-page full length, because this is what I learned how to do working in Hollywood. So,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it just helps me, just all the beats. I get to see where the weaknesses are in the story, fix them, and then, yeah,
Awesome.
exciting
Awesome.
stuff. Yeah.
So I guess when you're writing, you're composing in your head as you're writing, and then do you finish like the scene or the chapter and then make notes of the music? How does that process work for you?
Yeah, so what I will more often than not do is I'll pick up my guitar and I'll say, okay, I can hear voices in the key of B minor, and I can hear, male voices. Okay, I'll put the guitar down and put the writing computer down and switch on my digital audio workstation. And Mark, the software these days is phenomenal. There's a piece of software now that is a choir software that you can type in what words you want the choir to bloody sing,
Oh,
and
really?
you play. Yeah,
Oh,
and you can
wow.
play incredible stuff. So there's so many toys, there's so much to do, and I often will find myself peeling away from the computer where I'm typing to recording. So I swap.
Awesome. Well, wow. Thank you for hanging out with me. Can you please let my listeners know where they can find you online and connect with you?
Absolutely. So I am on Instagram at Dominician Gennari. That's my full name. So at Dominician Gennari. Facebook's the same. My website is dominiciangennari.com. And of course, Amazon, if you type in the War for Ascension, it usually does rank, yeah, it gets high up there. So you'll find that it's a fairly unique name. You may get Brandon Sanderson's The Well of Ascension pop up, but
Yeah.
that's okay.
Pretty good
He's
company to be in, right? Yeah.
pretty good company to be in. So, yeah, you can find me on those. And you know what? Reach out to me on social media. Reach out to me on Instagram, or if you've purchased a book and you want the album, I'll send it to you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dominician, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's an honor to be on the Stark Reflections podcast, and I'll be sure to send it all around.
So a few things I want to reflect on in relation to the interview is the very first was when Dominician was talking about his childhood and growing up in a home where the family was singing together in the kitchen while cooking. I'm in awe of just how beautiful and magical that is. Now, I want to look at us as writers and creators, storytellers, in all the guises, right? So writing and composing music and playing music, etc. Cooking is in and of itself a beautiful art form, and I have some really wonderful, incredible memories of my Baba and my mom. Baba's my Polish grandmother, Ukrainian Polish grandmother. Weirdness that she spoke Ukrainian, was from Poland. It was just, she had a great medley of the two cultures, so it's a really confusing thing, but technically she was Polish. And I think Baba is a Ukrainian term, where it's babcha or something like that when it's Polish. But anyways, I digress. My mom and my Baba in the kitchen. And the way that they masterfully, the way that an entire day would be taken up with making hundreds and hundreds of pierogi, or the jams and the preserves, or all of the various things that they were making, and my dad and I had to stay out of the way. And I was just thinking about it. It becomes this whole thing that takes over the whole house. So I'm imagining Dominician's family like in the kitchen and working together, and just how amazing that experience would be. And when I think back to maybe just a half dozen years ago, being here with Liz in the house and having her three daughters and my kid in the kitchen Christmas Eve, because they would all be here for Christmas for a few days, and Easter and stuff like that. And the production, because I remember doing pierogies, and my mom, I got my mom's recipe, a handwritten recipe that there, and on the phone with her confirming that we're doing things right. And we're all involved in different aspects of the pierogi making. It was like this beautiful assembly line, and we're listening to music, and we're joking, and we're laughing, and we're just participating in this creation. So not only, are we eating the food together later, but we're creating it in conjunction with one another. There's this incredible composition because, the act of breaking bread, the act of actually consuming food with other people is a beautiful community. It can be a beautiful community experience, but then even creating that food. There was a time during the pandemic, Liz and I took an online course through a pub, again, wanting to support a local business on how to cook like a certain food. So we learned it was the first time we'd ever made Scotch eggs together. And that was, there were some other recipes that we did that evening. And again, it's us on Zoom with a whole bunch of other couples and the chefs from this local pub, this local restaurant that we were doing. And it was just this incredible experience. Not only were Liz and I cooking together in the kitchen, but on the screen on the laptop that's propped up in the kitchen so we could see the other people and the cooks, and they're walking us through the steps and stuff like that. So there's something really incredible about that joint cooking. And I think about when we're creating, when we're writing or composing music or whatever, we're cooking. Really, we're putting a recipe together of something that somebody else, right? When you think about a recipe and you're following a recipe to cook, or even if it's an oral tradition recipe or whatever, and sometimes, you're just making stuff up as you go along in the kitchen, all of that stuff, other people can enjoy it. Just like when you create your stories, other people can enjoy it. So anyways, Dominician left me with this incredibly powerful image that reminded me of my own experiences with family and kitchen and what that meant, and then just to think about how that impacted his music and the music that he learned and loved and grew up to compose, etc. So that was the one thing. The other thing was in relation to this Hollywood project, this television project and the pilot and stuff like that. And again, I really respect Dominician for not mentioning who was involved, not mentioning the specific details, because really it doesn't, it matters, but it doesn't really matter that we know who it is or what the issue was. There were some irreconcilable, oh my God, I can't say it. There were some differences that I'm not even going to bother trying to say it properly. There were some differences that were they couldn't get over, and you have to think. And again, I did say this to Dominician when we were talking, but the average writer, like when I hear that, I think, oh my God, I don't care how much they changed or would screw up my Canadian Werewolf in New York. I should be awesome to have a TV series based on it, right? So I have to get over the fact that when you're in the moment and the money's in front of you and all of that's there and all of these people are working on something, and you get to a point where you say, no, that crosses the line with my integrity or my vision or what I perceive for this, that's a really hard thing to do. I think about my good friend Kevin Anderson and Brian Herbert, son of Frank Herbert, who've written dozens of novels in the Dune universe that Frank Herbert had initially created. And I think about the 2 or more decades of work that Brian and Kevin had done to find the right producers for the new Dune movies. The 2 new Dune movies, now there's going to be a TV series based on one of the books that Kevin and Brian have written. And just think about that integrity. There's you have to wait 20 years for the right thing to happen, as opposed to doing something prematurely. So the lesson in that, for me, and potentially for you, dear listener, is sometimes we're so excited to do something or to have something happen that we don't necessarily do it at the right time. Sometimes we do it a little bit early. So potentially, there's something that you've wanted to create or something that you've created and it failed, or it didn't work properly, or it didn't work the way you imagined it to work. Or something was supposed to happen and it fell through Okay, the cruising writers thing fell through as an example, personal example. I had attempted to launch a Kickstarter for One Hand Screaming on the 10-year anniversary. That failed miserably. It failed miserably. And I think I have a lot more value in what I put together for the 20th year anniversary, not just because it was an additional 10 years of stories that I've had published and I've written, etc., but I've learned so much more. And so when the thing doesn't work, sometimes there's something better that comes along. I can even go back to my first marriage, and I thought that was it. I thought that was my relationship for the rest of my life, and I was really destroyed and distraught when it ended, and I was in a really dark place for a while, thinking, "Wow, how did I screw this up?" But had that not, and we're still friends. We still co-parent separately. We have a great kid, a 20-year-old kid, and we still get along well. We actually probably get along better now than we did in the last few years of our marriage, except, you don't notice these things until afterwards. But had that not ended and me being devastated that it was over, I would not have met Liz. I wouldn't have met Liz, and I met Liz at the right time for both myself and for her. And so the lesson is that sometimes you can be disappointed that things didn't turn out the way that you had planned, or plans fell through or something, whatever, plans were broken or whatever, you had to back out of something that looked like a really good opportunity. And whether it was because there was something in it that didn't line up with your vision or your plan or your integrity or whatever it was, that's okay. There's probably something better, or there's probably something where the timing's going to work out better in the future. And even if not, you still have your integrity. I remember one of the lessons I remember talking to Alex about, and this was back in the pandemic, was we had regulations about going out in public after so many days after traveling from the U.S. because there was a fear in the air and we didn't really know for sure. So we took a lot of precautions about the spread of this disease that did kill millions of people. And unfortunately, people who were more, I guess, health compromised, the young and the old. I mean, a lot of us who were, in the middle there were relatively, we had bad side effects and stuff like that. And we didn't, die because we couldn't breathe. But there was a rule in Ontario or Canada, I guess it was provincially legislated as well as federally, that you couldn't go out in public after coming back from a trip for so many days. And Alex and I had tickets to Spider-Man that I'd pre-bought. And I remember talking to Alex about this and saying, nobody is going to know because this is based on an honor system. But, I have to cancel going out in public for this event because of this legislation. No one's going to know, but I'm going to know. And that's when it comes down to this integrity with Dominician and having to back out of these plans is, I'm going to know. And I have to live with myself, and I have to live with the decisions that I make. So don't ever beat yourself up for prescribing to your own integrity and your own moral standing. There are things that you will do for your writing career, and there are things that you won't do for your writing career. And again, I guess after a long rambling reflection, that's the takeaway that I got. So we'd all want a Hollywood deal, but at what cost? At what cost to the integrity, to the vision, to the dream, to the plan of the bigger plan? And that's definitely something that you can only decide for yourself. You can't let others make that decision for you. And so, thank you, Dominician, for helping me learn that. What about you? What did you reflect on in this interview with Dominician? I hope you enjoyed the music. I really enjoyed that. And editing, it was really difficult because at certain points in the musical clip, I had to fade the music down a little bit so you could hear Dominician talking over it. And I hope that didn't ruin the experience of the music. But it's so easy. If you've purchased the book, Dominician will send you the music. And I have the full soundtrack and actually have thought it would be really interesting to write to the soundtrack, to put it on in the background, because that's the kind of music I can listen to when I'm writing. I cannot listen to music with heavy lyrics and stuff like that in it, because the lyrics get in my head and I end up paying more attention to the song rather than to the emotion and the resonance of the music in the background that kind of creates that mood feel for me. But in any case, that is it for my reflections. That is it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to the patrons who support this podcast over at patreon.com/Stark Reflections. Your support, your patronage, the community aspect of that means so much to me. I appreciate that. I do appreciate all my listeners. If you want to support the podcast, you can still support the podcast by leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts, or better yet, share this episode or any episode that really resonated with you with somebody that you think would find value in it. So as I said, that's it for this episode. Until next week and until next episode, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com. Irreconcilable. 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 Of course, now that the podcast's over, I can say it now. Irreconcilable differences. I should go back and edit it, but this is funnier.